What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be making this awesome red maple and epoxy bowl. So stick around and I'll show you how I did it. So this is the blank that we're going to be working on for our little bowl project. It is a piece of red maple, as you can see. It's got this giant, what was a bark inclusion down the side here. It's got a little bit of a bark inclusion down the middle. It's also got some small cracking over here. A little chunk where that bark inclusion was right here. And as you can see, I have rough turned this, and this has been drying for a couple of months now right next to the wood stove. So it's very, very dry, probably around 8 or 9%. Coming a little bit closer, you can see all that crotch figure there. This is a piece of crotch wood, so obviously you're going to have a lot of cool grain. Inside of the bowl, that crotch figure continues. There's that bark inclusion a little bit closer up. As you can see, it's going to have a lot of really cool colors. We're going to have some epoxy work to do, and then there's a lot more cool grain over here, so very excited to turn this piece. So before we go ahead and glue our waste block onto the bottom of this piece, I just wanted to point out that when I rough turned this on the lathe 3 months ago, it was perfectly round, obviously, and then it dried by the wood stove for 3 months, and you can see how deformed the bottom of this bowl is and how out of round it is right now. We'll be able to turn that out later, but I just thought that was going to be cool to show you guys. So you're just going to want to butter up the bottom of your piece and make sure that you cover every inch that waste block's going to be on. I used to use wood glue to glue on my waste blocks, but I since switched to epoxy because epoxy is a lot stronger, and epoxy does a really good job of filling gaps. Wood glue, you need to have a really tight bond, and with epoxy, you can have gaps, and that's good because the bottom of these bowls obviously aren't going to be perfectly flat, even when you belt sand them, and so that's why the epoxy is just a much better adhesive. Okay, so once you've got that all on there, you've got it nice and buttered up, take your little waste block and just place it in the center. I always just guesstimate where it needs to go, make sure that it looks pretty good, it's not off to one side too far, and just let it sit overnight. Okay, so it's been 48 hours since we glued on our little waste block, and as you can see, it's nice and solid on there, so that's good. Now we have to deal with this massive bark inclusion on the side, and I actually a few minutes ago ripped out some of the loose bark so that way we can get more epoxy in there. So what we're going to have to do right now is build a mold and wall off this entire side so we can pour epoxy in from the inside. We're going to put this in a vise just to make it a little bit easier, and it's going to hold it while we build our mold. So I find it really easy to build the mold once you've already put your waste block on, because the waste block actually seals up a lot of the little cracks and gaps that would be on the bottom of your bowl. So that's good, and it also gives you a good way to mount the bowl so you can hold it in place. Okay, so I'm going to attach one end of my plexiglass onto my bowl, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to bend this plexiglass to make it fit around the radius of our bowl here. So now I'm going to use a little bit of heat and slowly start to bend our plexiglass around our bowl until it fits the shape really nicely. And as you can see now, it's really nice and soft. We can grab our hot glue gun, get a little bead of hot glue underneath of where that's going to be. And then we can just press it down into position. And yeah, it's going to be really hot. So I just glued on this little piece onto the top here that's going to wall off the end of our little crack, our bark inclusion here that got ripped out. So now we're about ready to pour our epoxy. Okay, so I've got this thing flipped over on its side, mounted in the vise. Now we're going to mix up a little bit of epoxy and pour it in. So I waited for the epoxy to get a little bit thicker, and I was able to kind of force some into the bark inclusion that was up here. And once that's dry, we're going to worry about this little section right here. But we're going to let this dry for 24 hours, and then we'll come back and finish it up. Okay, I've got my wood all mounted up in my lathe. I have the tailstock up here temporarily just for a little bit of extra support until we start getting this thing round. I think this bark inclusion is going to make a really cool look in the final piece. I don't think there's anything I can do right now except for start turning, so let's get this thing round. So now that I've cleaned up the outside here, you can really see all the cool grain that we have in there. You'll also notice that we have a couple little cracks. We'll just fill those with some CA glue. We got a lot of really cool grain, and obviously there's that big bark inclusion that we filled with epoxy. Again, just more cool grain. So now we're going to start hollowing out the inside and basically just cleaning it up. So I made an entire video talking about how awesome CA glue is. If you haven't seen that, I'll link that in the description box down below. I really like to limit how much glue I put on there because this stuff will stain and it doesn't look great. Okay, so you might notice that there's something wrong with our bowl, and you would be correct. So I was turning, just cleaning up the walls on the inside, and a ginormous chunk of epoxy just flew out and shattered. So I'm not exactly sure what caused that to happen, but all I know is what we're going to have to do now is build a mold on the inside here again and cast more epoxy. I'm really not sure why that epoxy didn't stick to that wood at all. This wood is extremely dry, like I said, about 6-7%. So I'm going to do another epoxy pour, and we'll try it again tomorrow. Okay, so I know that wasn't a lot of time for you guys, but that was 2 days ago that I filmed that last clip. Now, I refilled this with epoxy. I didn't want to bore you with that since I've already done the epoxy pour in this video. Anyway, it looks pretty nasty, but I think we're at the point where we can start sanding this thing. We've got quite a lot of tear out. This wood is very dry. We've got some cracks that I filled, and my walls are getting pretty thin, so I don't want to be turning any more than I have to. So I'm probably just going to hit this thing with some 40 grit sandpaper, and we'll get this thing nice and smooth. just finishing the bowl with a little bit of Armor Seal. I'll put a link in the description box down below if you want to go get your own. So guys, this piece is completely finished. I gave it 5 coats of General Finishes Armor Seal, sanding in between each coat, and this thing just turned out incredible. The finish is extremely smooth, and I love the look of all that crotch figure in the bottom, as well as that bark inclusion that we filled. You can see some of the cracks on the side that we also filled with some CA glue. And what really impresses me about this red maple is just all of the color variation that you get, all the different tans and browns and greens and stuff that you get. It's just truly incredible wood. So if you ever have an opportunity to work with red maple, definitely do it. Guys, thank you so much for watching this week's video. I had a lot of fun making this red maple and epoxy bowl. It turned out incredible. This thing's actually going to be for sale, so I'm going to leave a link in the description box down below so you can go and visit my website. This bowl will be added as a product on my website by the time this video is live, so if you're interested, definitely be sure and check out the website. Also, be sure to check out my Instagram. I post a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. I've already posted a couple things about this, so definitely be sure to follow me on Instagram if you're not already following me on Instagram. And lastly, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. I've got a lot of really cool projects coming up as summer is right around the corner. Obviously, we're going to be building that new shop, and we're going to be doing some really nice furniture projects in that new shop, so definitely stay tuned. I'll see you guys next week.